All right, folks, I am here, and I certainly appreciate you guys being here waiting on me. Sorry that I had to run a little bit behind. Go ahead and turn the phone on vibrate. Let's see. Get everything squared here. Sorry about that, folks. Had a little bit of a situation there. Just I don't know if I mentioned it before, but my yeah, there you go. Hey, you're gonna have to read Corvid Codex if you had to come in. Hey, I mean, that would be actually kind of funny. Have somebody else come in and actually read our book. That would be fun on about 4 or 5 different levels there. And not to mention, I mean, let's just be true and honest about this. That is a fantastic way for me to get a little bit of cheap advertisement in there. So just for funsies, there in chat, we have got the link to purchase Corvid Codex Volume 1. It is fantastic. I'm quite fond of it. And we are drinking some Dragon Milk Reserve today. Coffee chocolate. Good stuff. Anyway, some of you may or may not know, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before. I work in mortgages. My wife works in is also a real estate agent, and we have a buddy who has got a subdivision going here, and she is the agent for it. Well, I'm sitting there and got dinner, just finished getting dinner ready and everything, got plates lined up and whatnot. At about 5:20, 5:15-ish, and I get a call from her that apparently there were some scammers up at the house we have listed, and there were some lights on, and there were some people who were, fake Century 21 agent guy that was trying to con somebody, and some other nonsense that happened up there. And she pulled up, and some lights were on, and other stuff like that. So she needed me to run out there and make sure that there were no transients or anybody hiding in the bathroom. Lucky for me, that neighborhood is right around the corner from my own. So I was able to fly down there, do a quick sweep, and make sure that nobody was hiding in any closets or anything, and head on back. And, nothing was damaged. Nothing was out of ordinary or anything. So it didn't end up taking but about, 5-10 minutes to run through the house and have a look. So that's the excitement. Of course, it happens immediately, like right after, right when I'm supposed to be there. If you guys will, so yeah, I mean, emergency in terms of urgent needs to get out there, but luckily it wasn't like broken down on the side of the road or anything like that. While we're here, before I get too busy cracking as some folks filter in, we're going to talk about my own game tonight. I'm going to be doing some reviews of some other folks' games here coming up in the near future, but we're going to talk about mine this evening. But we are also here because Eclectic Goat. For those of you who do not know who Eclectic Goat is, she is kind of a champion of the indie scene. She's an editor. She edits game books and she edits everything, but she edits game books, and she raises goats and all that kind of stuff. She's pretty fantastic. I've been on her show before. She's had the guy who made Traveler, the original creator of Traveler, on her show. She's had the original creator of Villains and Vigilantes on her show. She's had Professor DM there to talk about what the definition of an indie game is. So she's had some good folks on her show, and she'll be doing some stuff on Monday talking about editing. Yeah, Mark Miller. You are correct. I love it how I got a little extra here, so it's like I just grab the bottle instead of grabbing my cup. But no, Goat's great, and she's a big supporter of the hobby and everything. And she has had some seriously bad health news come her way. She publicly shared it that, it could have been a series of minor strokes or a neurological disorder or something that's come up here recently. Point is that she is about to have a tremendous amount of good old-fashioned expensive health bills coming up. So, as much as I would love for every last one of you to smash the super chat button and send money my way this evening, instead, I have a pinned comment there. I'll also post it again later. She has the ko-fi.com/the eclectic goat. Go dump some money her way. Send a little love her way. See if we can help cover up some of those co-pays and other things, that testing that she's got coming, or maybe give her the extra little bit of boost she needs to where she doesn't have to shut her channel down and stop doing what she does while she deals with this. But this community tends to come together. When Atten over at We Love TTRPGs had some issues, had folks coming in here to super chat to help support him. It is better if instead of super chatting to me, you go to her Ko-Fi link and do it directly, because then we don't have to worry about all the nonsense I have to go through with waiting till there's enough money to cash out, and YouTube tax bills and YouTube taking a 30% cut and all that other nonsense. So just roll on over to the Eclectic Goats Ko-Fi page there and throw a couple bucks her way, and let's do what we're supposed to do and actually be that community part of the TTRPG community. No. Old Mikey D in the house. I did not happen to catch that post on AI game system creation. That I'm going to have to check out, because Alexander McCrease he's brilliant. He's probably one of the smartest guys in the hobby. Just an absolutely amazing designer with the kind of credentials that really, it's kind of funny. The only person I think in the hobby that I know of that has the same kind of credentials that he has, Agile Monk is close, because he has a lot of contacts in that regard, a lot of stuff in there. And then of course Max Liao from Legion of Myth, because Max Liao from Legion of Myth, that's what he does in his day job, because he goes in there and he develops, or he has in the past worked on like real life war games, not war gaming, not Warhammer, not 40K fantasy Mage Knight, any of that, but like actual war games that have to emulate real situations for the military. And before he started The Escapist, if I'm not mistaken, Alexander McCrease was worked with West Point in the same regard. So you're talking about levels of, now, even when you talk about like a Sandy Peterson or a Mark Miller or any of the other designers that have worked in our hobby who have exceptional talent and have put out some really exceptional games and that sort of thing, they're not putting together games that are designed to help make sure that people don't get blown up with missiles. So it's a little bit of different stakes there and a little bit different caliber. But yeah, I would be very interested to see that. I think AI is going to be it's going to be a very, very good tool for smart game designers. I think you're going to have some game designers who are arrogant or who have a bias that they will not let go of, who will 100,000 times run away from AI 1,000,000 times over. And I think you're going to have some lazy game designers who want to try and use AI to create their own systems and to do the work for them. And neither one of those, I think both of those are going to end up producing lower caliber products in the market. However, when you have intelligent game designers who are not going into this with any kind of bias or any kind of just the AI hate, that sort of thing, is going to be, you're going to have these people who come out there and they say, okay, I can take the system I'm developing, I can plug it into AI and then I can run 50,000 iterations to see if it does what I want it to do, to see if the bell curve is positioned where I need it to be. And as these designers, especially if you get a designer who really knows how to work AI, just like we've had in pretty much every industry so far, pretty much every industry has had people go in and start taking ChatGPT or Claude or I don't know if anybody's used Grok for it, or Perplexity or anything like that, and has developed industry specific AI. So, for instance, in my industry, we have Milo. Milo is a mortgage industry specific ChatGPT setup where it has been programmed to have certain parameters, like it only searches through official government documents or official agency websites. It won't go to randommortgagecompany.com or Facebook or anything like that. All it will do is pull directly from HUD, from Fannie Mae, from Freddie Mac, from VA, from US, from the Rural Housing Project for the Department of USDA, that sort of thing. And while it isn't perfect, I can run mortgage scenarios through it, and it can spit out information and link me back to the guidelines that I need it to link me back to. I can go to it knowing that these are the up-to-date current guidelines for that agency to further research it myself, and it saves me a tremendous amount of time. You're going to have game designers who can do the same thing, who start programming either a ChatGPT or a Perplexity or something, basically building an ecosystem with their system. And in addition to proper play testing with real players, they're going to be able to take that, plug it into that AI and say, run 5,000 games. And a minute later, they're going to have data from 5,000 games run using those parameters. And it is going to cut down a tremendous amount of work in developing the way rule sets and stuff work for some of these designers. At least people who are actually trying to design systems and games, and not just, the more, I guess you could say, the copy pasters. I hate to say that, because let's face it, the OSR is not just copy paste. There is copy paste there. There are people who just say, I just scrubbed the serial numbers off BX and called it my own game. But let's be fair here. There's a lot of BX you're working, or OSR games, and for the most part are working off of an already developed system. However, they could still use that same AI mentality to test their tweaks. Like, for instance, Kelsey Dion could have used it to test the impact of her torchlight mechanics and stuff like that, and done it very, very quickly. So it's just like anything else. If you're going to use a tool, understand that tools have a use and put them to that use. And you can make them work the way, if you realize that that's what they are and you use them appropriately instead of trying to use them as a replacement for your own intellect and work, then that's something that can really, it can be a real force multiplier. See here, old Mac Thompson. Good man being here. Mac always shows up. And I saw you on Facebook telling people to get in here, and I appreciate that, my friend. Pales in comparison to real life Gen X BB gun war in the woods. Somebody has been running around there doing a little airsoft. Let's see whether they keep removing humans from the equation, and eventually humans are no longer in the equation. You see it ending badly. I don't. And there's a reason I don't. That is, like I said, you have to look at this as a tool. The people who use it as a tool are going to be the people who see the benefits from it. The people who try to use it as a human replacement are not going to, those are not going to be the people who get any benefit out of it. They may be able to scrub out a bronze seller on drive-through RPG if they can sneak it past their algorithm. They may get some people to throw some pay what you want money to them or something like that. They're not going to be able to develop something that has commercial success. And if they do, the person who uses an AI created game that makes a true commercially viable product has two very, very serious issues. The first one is I can wholesale copy his entire game and sell it myself, because AI is definitively not something that is subject to intellectual property law. That is a hard line that has already been ruled on. You can create whatever you want to through AI, but you can't protect it. So yeah, you make a great best-selling game or something, Shadowfell superheroes or whatever, and you put it out there and it's entirely made by AI, and you're stupid enough to let everybody know it's entirely made by AI, I can literally copy your books and sell them, because you don't have any expression in that. Only a machine does, and machines cannot have protection. That is one thing out there, speaking of using it as a tool. I've said before that it is a force multiplier, and it equalizes things, because you get somebody who doesn't have a $10,000 art budget but needs decent art and puts a lot of work and effort into doing AI art for their game book. That can help them be on par with the big publishers. However, they have to do it understanding that every piece of art they make has no AI, has no IP protection. I can literally rip their cover, take pictures out of their monster manual or whatever they call it, and use them in my stuff, and there's nothing they can say about it, because it is not protectable if it is made by AI. So the only thing that's really at debate in the courts is, where is the I have enough, input that it's considered now human expression, versus where is it too much AI? Trust me, man, I'm getting kind of to the point, kind of getting to your side of things too here. But the other thing there is like I said, it as a tool, it's just like any other tool. The horse and buggy didn't ruin the world. The Luddites were wrong. The world was not ruined by industrial machinery. However, yes, people are becoming extremely lazy. You are going to have a bunch of garbage slop going out there. And there are going to be some people here's where I think you're probably going to have a serious issue. And I think, Mac, you'll agree with me on this. Where you're going to have a serious impact, that is a major problem, is while the barrier to entry is going to be lower and the playing field more level for, say, the little guy, as they say, for the indie creator, for the guy, like me, who is literally sitting in his office, between between work calls or on his off time, punching out game rules and thinking about them when he's laying in bed at night. For every guy who's like that, who gets a little bit of a level playing field because they use AI, and it's kind of ironic because I don't, but let's say that there's somebody like me who does and uses that force multiplier, that is offset on the opposite side of the coin, where my indie game has to wade through a sea of garbage slop that is pumped out. And there's going to be situations where I don't get the chance that I would have gotten before, because they're like, oh, small creator, got to be AI. Small creator who uses AI, got to be slop. I'm not going to waste my time or money even researching it, because it's probably slop. And there's, the last 10 games that I took a chance on all turned out to be garbage, slop, broken, busted, that somebody just ran through an AI and ran through a large language model. It came out garbage. I'm not giving Joe's game a try. So for those of us who choose the straight and narrow, the long, hard row, and just, excuse me, tote that barge and haul the line, will get the benefit of, hey, he's not using AI. But yeah, I think that there's two sides to that coin, and how lazy people are becoming is definitely going to be a problem, because you're going to have lazy people who didn't want the hard work beforehand who are going to flood the market, and we're going to have to wade through that crap. Yeah, right there. Nearing general artificial and super AI, things getting dicey for us meat bags. Yeah, and that is true. As these language models get better, you're going to start getting to the point where you're not allowed to make your mistakes professionally anymore. Right now, let's not pretend that Kelsey Dion put out a perfect project. All right, let's not pretend she did. But Shadow Dark's great. Shadow Dark took her like 10 years to make. She put a lot of time and effort and work into it, and it still isn't perfect. And as the bar of how good the quote unquote AI slop is rises, you're not going to be able to go out there and say, well, let me get a, forget $1 million. Let me get a $5,000 Kickstarter for my first game that has problems, because I haven't put this stuff out in the world. I don't have the resources to test it as heavily as I should. I'm a human being, and I have to go out and try it. And, no plan survives contact with the enemy. No business survives contact with the customer. I got to go out, put my game out, realize like Gary Gygax that it's not finished, bring it back, make the advanced version, realize that that's not quite right either, bring it back, try to make second edition, get run out of my company, and then later make my second edition as Castles and Crusades. I've got to go through that process. If you've got AI, let's just use Gary Gygax as an example. If AI can make Castles and Crusades, let's just say it can create Castles and Crusades off of a good series of prompts. Gary Gygax doesn't get to make Dungeons and Dragons and then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and have the success necessary to continue along, because there's something that just cranked out the better version of his game, buried him before he ever got a chance to come out and make those mistakes. So that is, Mac, you are right on that. That is something that has to be looked at. So let's talk about my project. But before let's talk about my project, let's remember, stupid thing, show what I tell you to show. There we go. Remember, our buddy the Eclectic Goat needs our help. Really does. She now, speaking of AI, she's something of a VTuber, so her character, she is an animated anthropomorphic goat figurine on the interwebs, but she is also a fantastic part of the community who is let's face it, she is a champion of the indie scene. Her reviews are of small indie games in this TTRPG space. And people like her help generate buzz and help get the word out for those small creators. And is she going to give somebody a review and turn them into the next Shadow Dark? No. But let's just say she did Corvid Codex. I have a feeling that if she went out and did Corvid Codex, I'd probably get a nice little blip in sales of that book. Why? Because she does have people who trust her on that regard. She does have an audience, and she is tied into that, and she has some professional expertise that she lends to this community. And she lends it freely, as we do with our YouTubing and whatnot. So if you don't already subscribe to her YouTube channel, if you don't already show up for her live streams, or at least watch the replays, if you don't already follow her on X or anything, do all that stuff that's free. And if you've got an extra few bucks, throw them her way. Let's see if we can get a couple of bucks in to, like I said, maybe cover a copay or something of that nature. All right. So now that we've been here for 25 minutes and I've been late. Let's talk about my game. Let's see here. Do I have one sitting over here? I do believe I do. I chose to base my game on this little guy right here. For those who don't know, this is a D30. There we go. We'll turn it upside down so that it reflects on there. Yes, I do have a link to our channel. I'll get that for you right quick. But yes, I am. I base my game on the D30, and I've been asked a bunch of different times why I decided to base it on the D30. One is because I'm very, very fond of the number 3. 3 is a very, very psychologically satisfying number from like a sales standpoint. It also has a deep history. If you look at a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for here? A lot of ancient cultures, they based a lot of their number systems and whatnot, and a lot of their, a lot of everything around 3s. Obviously, if you want to look at the, if you want to look at it from a Christian perspective, as our buddy Mac puts in there, the Trinity. Yes. Christianity is based around the Holy Trinity. 3 is a very, and 3 works into a lot of things. A lot of people don't realize this, but 3 is a number that actually factors into the human, not to get religious on everybody, but I think there's a good reason for this. I think it's a pretty evident good reason for this. But 3 factors into the way the human brain functions very well. If you think about it, it's actually pretty easy to bust things into thirds. It really is. And a lot of things, if you think of something like, if I say, hey, give me a couple of examples of something, like, hey, give me an example of some cars, you're probably going to crank out 3. Give me some examples of car companies. You'll be like, well, Chevy, Dodge, and Ford. And then you'll move into other ones. 3 is a number that is very natural. It occurs a lot in nature. A lot of things work there. Trilogies are very satisfying. So there is some salesmanship and psychology there. But the big reason that I based everything around the D30 is I find the D20 to be way too swingy. Having 5% for every single die face is way too swingy. I come from a 3.5 background, right? That is really where the nuts and bolts of my D&D comes from. And if we're being fair here, I have more experience with 3.5 than anything else. I started with Cyberpunk. I have a lot of experience with Cyberpunk, but the honest truth of the matter is I've played more 3.5 D&D than anything else. And we know what 3rd and 3.5 is kind of known for. It's known for falling apart at high levels because of how complex it is. It's known for a lot of things becoming, what's a word we can say here, like meaningless at high level. And why is that? Well, a big part of it, and by the way, I did just post in the chat, the GOAT's YouTube channel, for those of you who need it. But a big part of it is because in 3.5, you start getting to the point, and you really start to get to this point around 10th or 11th level, where your actual bonuses to do things outweigh the 20. You got plus 25 and plus 30 to things, right? You have outpaced the range of the system at that point. And with all the other things you can get, it's very easy to manipulate it to where when you're setting a DC, like if I'm a GM and I'm setting a DC that is within range for a player base, for my group, it's easy enough, especially at higher levels, for them to cheese things into a place where something that I had at like a DC, and I'm going to talk about the die face here, my DC is set at 17, which should be a very difficult choice, right? that means that there should be an 85% chance that they fail this task. It's very easy for them to manipulate that 85 into like a 5% chance, or a 20% chance that they fail that task. They can generate bonuses, they can generate situations to where that DC 17 turns into like a DC 4 or a DC 6. And so part of it was that range. That was part of the reason. I found that it was too swingy on the 20. Likewise, though, I found that if you go all the way up to like a D100 and you start running on a percentile-based system, you run into two issues. One is the number of situations where you actually need the D20 are slim to nil. They really are. Or you actually need the D100. Where you actually need 100 increments, it becomes slim to nil real easy. Most situations in a D100 game end up coming down to basically trying to up your degree of success. Like when you look at Call of Cthulhu, a lot of times you're not rolling to try and get a success. You're rolling because you're really trying to get that hard success, or that, I forgot what it's called, but the really hard success, right? And the D100 is, I find it for a lot of players kind of a psychologically overwhelming in a lot of ways. It feels like a big range. And when you look at a guy who game masters a D100 system game, a lot of times they end up cranking their DCs down into 5-point increments anyway. And it's like, if you're setting all your DCs and everything within 5-point increments, why are you not just rolling a D20 at that point? If you're pushing it down to where it's 5 and 10-point increments, why are you not just using the D10 or a D20 at that point? Plus, let's think about a D100. If I use a D100, and this is apropos because unfortunately we just lost the man who invented the D100. His name escapes me right now, but oh man, I hate that his name escapes me right now. That really does sting. But the man who invented the D100, and when I say the D100, I mean the good old fashioned golf ball D100 that has like, almost feels like it has sand in it. He passed away. But you either have to roll a D100, which I'm looking in vain for a D100 that I would have around here, but I don't. I guess it's downstairs, which is a very unwieldy die, or you're constantly rolling 2D10. I do like D100 games. I'm a big fan of Call of Cthulhu, but it's one of those situations where, as somebody who's thinking about a game critically from like a design standpoint of what do I think I could mechanically adjust, like looking at it as a machine and saying, what gears could I change to make this more useful? When I look at a D100 game, I'm always like, reducing the range from 100 to 60 or 70 or 30 is better in more situations. And let's face it, this right here, this D30, it's not much different than a D20. All right. When you get to a D100, the faces are so small, the stupid thing rolls forever. You think it's bad that your die gets like stuck against a piece of cardboard or something, stuck on the edge with a D20 too much. When you got a D100 and that thing's rolling all over the place and then doing the wiggle, anybody who owns one of those D100 golf balls knows what I'm talking about. It gets to where it stops and it's over and over again. It wiggles back and forth all over the place. That's an unwieldy piece of equipment, so to speak. Also, I'm not super fond of a die where you have to have a percentile die and a tens die. You got somebody who's out there rolling 2D10s who's trying to argue which one's the tens die based on what's better for their roll at that point in time. So I find it to be more unwieldy in the practical play of the game. So those are part of the reasons why I chose to go the D30. I called the game the 3612. And I'm going to hold off on 1 second here. I'm going to, let me see if I can have a tad bit of fun here. I'm not entirely sure I can make this work without, let's see here. I think I got sound turned on. Good. I'm going to go ahead and punch this in as a poll. Let's see. Can I do it as a poll? I don't want to. Poll might give away the answer. All right, so I'm not sure how the question and answer thing works, but there is a question over there in the question and answer section. I think if you click on that, it'll actually punch you over there and say, hey, answer this question. Which is funny because I can't actually see it from from StreamYard. So I'll click back over to YouTube here in a minute and look at it. But punch the question over there. Why do you think I've called this the 3612 system? And while we do that, I'll go over like the core mechanic of what I got coming up here. So let's see here. Oversized golf ball, preferred percentile dice. 60 and horrible, 30 is much better. You are absolutely correct. 60 is about the upper limit of a functional die. That is something that is not a pain in the ass to use on a regular basis, at least in my opinion. And then, of course, kind of backing that up, Mac Thompson with the never liked the D100, but I've always had a D10 and a 10s die in my pouch, as you should. That is how we work as gamers, making sure that we always have the good stuff there. So let's see. I got my questions up over there on YouTube's. Like I said, I'm not sure how that works. I'll check it here in a second after I go over the core mechanic. So what I did is I'm going with a skill-based game. I like skill-based games better than class. And I like role, like ROLE, role-based games better than class-based games as well. So, Cyberpunk works that way. I feel that it has a more even character progression. It's less stepped plateau character progression. It's nice and smooth because you're spending your points spread out over a course of a bunch of different skills to improve smaller aspects of your character in order to make that character a more unique creation. And it makes it a lot easier to stay in that aspect of where we always have a problem with D&D is the characters end up getting invincible. It's been a problem since day one. The Tomb of Horrors exists because Gary Gygax's own characters got to a point where they were like, we're invincible and you can no longer beat us. We're so powerful. We're so great. So he's like, really? Well, here, go in here and see if you're still impossible to kill. So that started at the very beginning. It's only gotten worse since WotC took over, right? You end up going into like Call of Cthulhu. You end up going into Traveler. You end up going into Cyberpunk. You're just as easy to wipe out at level 1 as you are at level 20 because there are no levels. Everybody's the same level. You may have better skills. You may be harder to kill, but as old Seth Skorkowski said about Cyberpunk, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the streets. If you get stabbed with a switchblade, it hurts. And it can probably kill you. Getting the switchblade through the eye kills you whether you're, the highest of the high or the lowest of the low. And that helps out quite a bit because you start running into the big disconnect. For me, realism is a big deal. And when I say realism, I mean being able to logically think to myself that this is a functional world that I'm in. And like you get into Dungeons and Dragons, sure, there's stuff you can challenge these 10th and 15th and 20th level characters with. But how do you really work them into your world in a way that makes any kind of sense? Because the stuff that challenges a 15th level 3rd edition D&D character is world ending. These are the kind of creatures that walk in and take over the planet whenever they want to. And you say, well, no, not if there's a bunch of, other 15th and 20th and 10th level characters and stuff like kind of like the Forgotten Realms. But let's face it, the Forgotten Realms is a crap show. Nothing about the Forgotten Realms makes sense. How did Dritz Do'Urden ever make it to level 16 or 17 as a fighter? Makes no sense because he was surrounded by people who wanted to kill him that were level 15 and 20 because there's too many of them. So you end up with the that high barrier to entry for your characters, and it causes this big disconnect. And then if you have a realistic world, it's like, well, here's this great thing that's going to challenge my 15th level characters, but it's also going to destroy the world in the process. He fought all the orcs. All of them. That is, yeah, there you go. He's just like South Park. He went and killed pigs outside of town until he got to level 100. So that's one of the reasons why I've never liked the class-based games. I don't want you to level up like that. I want you to space your stuff out. And if you end up being the world's greatest mechanic, I want you to suck at everything else because you dumped all of your points into mechanic. So, skill-based game. Everything is a skill. All your attacks are skills. All your ability. You may have special role abilities that are based off of its own unique skills that you're allowed to access. So I guess you could technically be like, let's use some D&D terms here, a level 4 wizard. But a level 4 wizard just means that you have 4 points, 4 skill ranks in the wizard class, so to speak. And I built the game up to where you have a maximum of 20 in your attribute score, a maximum of 20 in your skill, and a maximum of 30 on the die roll. So quite literally 70 is the highest DC that anybody can possibly meet, right? Because it's real simple. Attribute score added to skill level, added to D30. That's your rolls. That's the how the system works. The way opposed rolls work, say for combat or for any other situation, like any kind of negotiating, if you really need to do that, is everything is done in a step system where it's about how much you beat the other person by. You want a critical hit, it means that we've gone into combat and I've beaten you by more than 5. We both rolled. You got a 25. I got a 26. I have 4 more skill points than you. I'm 5 higher than you. I've got a hit. So I'll use combat as an example. If you're within that range of 5, nobody hits anything. This is we traded blows. This is we parried and repost. And parry, repost, parry, dodge. Nobody made contact because we're within 5 points of each other. One person exceeds the other by 5. Okay, we've got a hit. We've got a minor hit. Now we go into the armor system where armor actually reduces damage as opposed to being part of your 2 hit. I beat you by 10. Now I've got a critical hit. My skill has exceeded yours so greatly in that moment that I parried your blow and my repost jammed right into your throat. And if I'm exceeding you by 15, I don't have a critical hit. I have a dire hit. And a dire hit, if I'm, Podunk City Guard guy going up against Great King's champion, but I somehow managed to exceed by 15, I may have just killed the King's champion, even though I'm just, Bob from accounting who came out here on Saturday. I'm I may be the National Guard guy who comes out to drill once a month for a weekend, and I may have just taken out the Navy SEAL. But all those opposed checks are based on the gap between the two people's roles for level of success. And then, of course, it's a straight DV for your inanimate object type test. Like, can I pick the lock? Same thing, though, when you're talking about a DV. I got a task. It has a DV of 30, which if you're looking, DV of 30 is not a very difficulty value, right? Because your maximum is 70. So let's say he's got a DV of 30. I fail by 5. Okay, I failed. I fail by 10 or between 5 and 10. Okay, I failed and it's bad. I'm picking a lock and I made a crap load of noise. I fail by more than 10. Maybe I broke that lock and now there's no way for me to unlock it. And I made a whole bunch of racket. Same thing. I succeed by 5. Okay, I picked a lock. I succeed by, 10. Man, I've managed to pick this lock with some other advantage to it. Or I'm picking it, I'm able to set it to where it locks again behind me. So it's a locked door. I get up and I start doing like succeed by 15. I'm having the ability to set it up to where now it no longer, for me, it works with my lock pick because I know how to do it, but it no longer works for the key anymore. I've essentially selectively damaged this lock to where I know how to open it, but now the guy with the key can't anymore. So everything is based off of ranges from the difficulty value, which I feel would give characters a lot more depth and a lot more breadth of what happens in these instances. And for game masters, because I always try to look at things in kind of a game master focused way. For game masters, it gives you an ability to adjust your challenges to where simple success and simple failure are no longer the only real options. And in situations where, like, you really need to have a die roll because you need to have some advantage there, but role play should have a major impact on it. It gives you a greater range of ways to do things. Because, like, let's say, for instance, the classic example of a charisma check. I'm negotiating with somebody. I'm trying to get them to do what I want them to do. Well, in D&D, I'm going to give them some bonuses or I'm going to give them some minuses. Well, I mean, all I'm really doing is moving the goalpost for success or failure. It doesn't really change anything other than how likely I am to succeed. Whereas in this system, when I move a DV, it not only has a greater effect, for instance, it also brings those beneficial effects more into play. So it's like, okay, cool. You had this really great speech that you want to put forward. I'm going to lower my DV by 5. So yeah, you have a better chance to succeed. However, you also have a better chance to get some additional benefits because of the level of your success. And it's not just simply, oh, I made it easier to succeed. What does this do to your players? Well, now you have that player who's like, you know what, I got a high charisma score. I got a bunch of points in diplomacy or whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and spit this crap out. And, I don't need to do anything. Oh, I want to convince the guard, clack, roll my D20. Oh, look, I rolled a 2, but it doesn't matter. I got plus 20. So give me my success. Now your player still has an impetus to try and dive deeper in and come up with better ideas because they're not just competing for success or failure. They're competing for greater levels of success and failure. So that's how that gap system works. Let's go ahead and check the old question and answer over here, see if I got any more answers in here real quick. And then I'm going to talk about how I've got my development here. Let's see here. Because I'm using 3D12s. No, God of Kai, I am not using 3D12s. Let's see here. Mike, man, that is cruel, dude. It's called 3612 because the 12 people that buy it, 6 won't own a D30. What's hilarious is that this is actually probably the I would say this is probably the closest to a correct answer. That of the 12 who buy it, 6 won't own a D12. Yes, or won't own a D30. Yes, that I'm going to tell you why that is the closest. It's called the 3612 system because that's a great illiterate way to point out the fact that the game runs on the D3, the D6, the D12, and the D30. Everything is a multiple of 3. All of the dice fold into each other, which as a game master makes it extremely easy for you to fold things into one another if you want to make various minor adjustments. Kind of like GURPS, my general idea for this game system is to make a functional system that you can then take and create your own game out of. I am working on Cyber City Dodge, which is a cyberpunk-based game in my world of the Strand, which is in Corbin Codex. If you haven't bought a copy, get it. You'll know more about the world. But it's based in Dodge City, Cyber City Dodge. And then, of course, I'm also working on the Dreaming Dark, which is a kind of Conan-esque Hyboria type setting. But everything folds into 3s. Everything falls into that easy to calculate, psychologically satisfying number and fits into one another. You know, when you look at different weapons, how they play into one another because they're all multiples of each other. What we got here, I don't know what is going on with StreamYard today, but I have to click on a comment like 9 times to get it to say anything. Planning to sell a D30 from an Etsy store to support your game. Not a bad idea. I'm not going to lie, as a career salesperson, one of my immediate thoughts was another great thing about using a D30 as opposed to a D20 or something is not everybody owns a D30. So I can sell the version of the book that comes with a D30, or I can sell D30s. I can buy them in bulk and put them out there, and I can, make a second revenue stream, so to speak. I'm not going to lie, that definitely came through, was definitely a thought that I had, was we're going to push this D30 as well. Let's talk about some stuff that I think some of my old school guys are going to like about what I've set up with this game. So throw an X in chat if you have ever rolled a character 3d6 down the line. Oh, wait a second. So if you've ever gone in and said, I'm going to roll my character, it's going to be 3d6 straight down the line. Maximum of 18. Maybe I get a 3. Maybe I get a 12. Maybe I get an 18. So if you've ever done that, let me know. Okay, so we got at least 2 folks who have done that. All right, so God of Kai, why, huh? I'll tell you why, because it's an interesting way to play the game. I've had totally randomly rolled 3D 3rd edition characters where the stats are 3d6 down the line, where the class and the race are rolled off of dice to determine what your race and class are. So I've actually had completely randomly rolled characters and told people they got to deal with them, which is fun because saying a wizard who has 16 strength and 6 intelligence is I mean, it's wonderful. So, 11, 9, 14, 9, 14, 13. I am building a cleric. That's what I'm building off of that, more than likely. Almost certainly a cleric. So, what I did with the D30 system, this 3612 game, is you have what is called the genetic role and the experiential role. So, as I said, your maximum, right? Your maximum is 20. That's the maximum you can have. Now, it is suggested in the book, or because I have written a big chunk of the rule book so far, but it is written in the book that it is suggested that you cap initial character roles at 18, basically making sure that you cannot go over 18 with your initial role. In Cyber City Dodge, for instance, it is impossible to get over an 18 unless you have cybernetic enhancement. So 18 is your max. However, how do you get there? You start with your genetic roll. You take a D12 and you roll your D12 all the way down the line for all of the key stats, of which there are 8. There's 10 total stats, 8 of which are rolled, 2 of which are derived. So we roll our D12 all the way down. These are your genetic rolls. Why do we have genetic rolls? We have genetic rolls because you don't get to choose what you're born with. Right? You don't get to choose what you're born with. You have to, you have to play the hand you're dealt, so to speak. And because of that, that means that this is your genetics. This is what you were born with. Following that, we have different methods of getting the, as I called it, the experiential role. So what does experiential role mean? Well, it means kind of, in a lot of ways, exactly what it sounds like. And I'm trying to get, there we go. I'm trying to get my rule book pulled up here. So the experiential role is your life experience up until the game comes into play. So you go through your genetic roll. You roll your D12 for strength, agility, reflexes, vitality, intelligence, resolve, awareness, and presence. These are your genetic rolls. Then you have the standard game, the dire game, and you have the heroic game. What that means is you essentially have built-in difficulty levels. You want to run a terrible, like, everybody's going to die, it's hard as hell, what can we do type game, you run a dire game. And in these games, you're only given 12 points for you to distribute throughout your attribute points as you want, as you wish. If you look at that, that means a 6.5. So a 6 or a 7 is going to be the average roll on a D12. So let's just go with a 7. Let's give it the best chance possible. And you got 8 different stats. You're barely getting to 10. 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. And you're going 3 and you got 12 points to put onto these 8 stats. It's going to be real hard for you to get 2.5 points on 7. So you're getting 9s and 8s across the board if you're looking at averages. This is going to be a tough as hell character to play, right? Then you have a standard game where you're given 24 points. And then you have a heroic game. You want to play some 5e? You want to make your characters tough and more powerful than everybody else? Well, we're going to give you 40 points to distribute. And if you look at that, the way I've set that up is you run basically an average of 10 in a standard game, 10 or 11, with you run an average of like 8 or 9 in the dire game. And in the heroic game, you're running an average of 12 or 13. It's giving you basically, you have created a situation where the genetic role sets this precedent, but you can still customize your character with these points. If I have somebody who rolled a really low intelligence, let's say they rolled like a 4 intelligence in a standard game, but they really want to play a wizard, they could dump, of their 24 points, they could go in and dump 14 of those 24 points directly into their intelligence and have a wildly powerful wizard, even though they had a really terrible genetic roll. And then they can turn around and tell me as a game master, if we're going to do, as I am, a narrative game master, a Hickman Revolution guy, they can come to me and they can say, well, part of my backstory is that I wasn't the brightest kid, but I hit the books and that's all I ever did. That's also why my vitality is not the best in the world, or why my reflexes aren't so great, because I spent all my time in there. Or, I was born a wimpy kid with like a 6 strength. Like I was really, or a 5 strength. I really wasn't a strong kid. I was below average for a kid. But then all I did was hit the gym all the time. And now I have like power lifter level strength because I decided to put 10 or 12 of my experiential points into strength. This will be fun because it's probably going to play into intelligence as a dump stat coming up this week. I ran with more attributes because we had some folks that were sitting there last week talking about, night danger over there with the Bro SR. You can't separate wisdom and intelligence. They're the same thing. You can't be intelligent but not wise, or wise but not intelligent. They're both using your mind. And it's like, all I said to him was, it's like, really? Because since they both use your mind and they have to be the same, that sounds to me like, if I can roll a quarter around on the back of my fingers, I should also be able to power lift. I should also be able to deadlift 1,000 pounds, because my high dexterity should guarantee a high strength since they both use my body. Idiotic, right? Me, however, I separated these when I made the 3612. And I would really greatly like to hear what people think about this, to be honest. But I made 4 physical attributes of strength, agility, reflexes, and vitality. And I made 4 mental attributes of intellect, resolve, awareness, and presence. And then hit points and instinct are both derived statistics. I'll get to those in a second because I think those are also, at least in my opinion, I think that they are solving some of the issues that especially we've had in D&D. I agree. His comment is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. I've had a lot of stupid bouncing around my ex here the last couple of days, and it's good because it makes my life easier on Mondays. But anyway, so strength is exactly what you think it is. Measure physical ability to exert force on other physical objects of the world, like breaking down doors and picking stuff up. Agility is one of the things that I broke. I broke Dex in half. Agility is balance and coordination and precision. However, reflexes are your ability to physically react quickly to changes in your environment. It takes agility to throw a ball accurately. It takes reflexes to dodge a ball that somebody threw at you that you didn't expect to have coming. So they're not the same. All right. Vitality is, your vigor and your physical stamina. It's also kind of a split stat because it's part of constitution, right? It's your ability to physically resist something. Like if I ate a rotten tomato, am I going to be sick and throw up? I don't know. My vitality is going to help me with that. All right. Intellect. That's your intelligence. That's your ability to process information, understand, store things, decipher coded messages, that sort of thing. So let's go into these two split stats, because we all know presence is essentially like charisma. It's your character's force of personality, their ability to influence others. I use presence instead of charisma because I like presence. Maybe I'm just really intimidating and I can influence you through like threat of physical violence. That doesn't necessarily fit the charisma stat of D&D, but it does presence. It's my ability to project myself and suck all the air out of the room. And so let's talk about these split stats, because these are going to be the split and the derived are really going to be the ones that are different for most of you guys. Everybody here is somebody who plays these kind of games. I don't need to talk about what strength and agility, because it's essentially what Dex normally is. Vital, intellect are. But let's talk about resolve and awareness. Resolve is the mental half of what we use Constitution for. Okay? That is the mental half of what we use Constitution for. So where we have agility and reflexes, agility is the physical aspect of, can I actually balance on this beam? Can I juggle these balls? Can I throw this dagger and stick it in the wall where I want it? And reflexes is, can I quickly respond to something, right? This person, maybe I'm kind of clumsy, but I'm real quick at reaching out there and, I'm clumsy, so I drop my beer, but I have great reflexes. So when I drop it, my hand snatches over here and catches it before it hits the ground, and I don't spill my beer, because even though I'm clumsy and have terrible agility, my reflexes allow me to catch it. So let's talk about vitality and resolve. Like I said, vitality, I eat something that's terrible. I eat a rotten tomato. Now I'm sick. All right. Do I get sick? Maybe that's a matter for vitality. Resolve is the mental counterpart to vitality. This is your ability to keep pushing forward without giving up. This is grit. This is determination. This is mental fortitude. This might be, okay, I ate the garbage, shitty tomato, and now I'm sick. Or I took poison, and now this poison is eating my body alive, and it's terrible, but I'm not going to throw up, right? I'm going to go out and give my speech before the king's court like nothing happened. That's a matter of resolve. That is my brain saying, no, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to keep going. This is my, I'm going to suck this up and I'm going to make it happen. This is, I drank too much and my vitality has decided that I am now very sick from drinking too much, but I'm not going to hug that porcelain god. I'm going to fight to keep that down every step of the way. I'm going to fight to stay awake. That is the measure of resolve. And I thought it was very important to separate those, because, and this is actually kind of funny because it does kind of go back around to that argument about wisdom and intelligence and whatnot that moron Night Danger was putting out there. Okay, he did have a decent point when he came out, when he was talking about wisdom, as far as like, he didn't say it because he didn't actually make this, but I was looking at him like, one of the problems I always had with wisdom is, why is wisdom the measure of my ability to like resist magic? Why is it the basis of my will save in third edition? Why am I making a wisdom save against somebody trying to manipulate me with magic? It's not an effect of wisdom. That's an effect of my mental ability to fight this in my brain. And that's not the same thing. It isn't. I renamed wisdom, at least functionally, the way it works in TTRPGs, is awareness. It's something that has to do with, as you say, if reflexes are your ability to quickly react to something being thrown at you, awareness determines whether or not you saw it coming in the first place. Wisdom is recognizing a man introduced as colonel has an older insignia for a lieutenant that is very similar to the modern colonel badge. It's those noticing those little things, catching those little details, being present in the moment. But that's not the same thing as the resolve to keep going because you're starving to death and you have to keep moving. You haven't had water in 5 days and you have to keep trudging through the desert. And yeah, I mean, yeah, Mac, you're absolutely right. You know, D&D's wisdom is kind of a mix of common sense and your mental resolve. I'm separating those. I want them to be separate. And I want them to be separate because one of the things that I set out to do with 3612, I hope that I'm being successful with this, is I want the crunch to happen at character creation. I want the crunch to happen away from the table. I want the table to be rolling a D30 and adding a number to it, and then the rest of it being immersed in the game. I want the crunch to happen because I have 8 stats and 2 derived stats instead of having 6 stats and a few other things. I want it to be not based on flipping through pages to figure out my special ability. I want everything to be much more organic. And I figure if I can make you take 2 hours to roll a character, but almost never have to worry about the book again, I think that's way better than me. Oh, I can roll a character in 15 minutes, but every 15 minutes I'm picking up a damn rule book to figure out how something works. That's my idea. I don't know if I'm making that right. I guess when I'm doing more play testing, we'll know for sure. But that's the idea. So let's talk about these derived stats. Hit points. We all know what hit points are. Hit points are your vitality plus your resolve plus your vitality divided by 2. So if I got a 13 vitality and a 10 resolve, 13 plus 10 is 23 divided by 2. That's 11.5. Rounded up to 12. You got 12 hit points. All right. So let's figure that out. The maximum you can possibly have is 20 hit points. Maximum you can have is 20 hit points. And that is somebody who is magically or cybernetically enhanced in both their mental toughness and their physical toughness. And you'll notice that your hit points don't just come from your vitality or your constitution, so to speak. They also come from your mental toughness, so they can represent that maybe, let's just do an experiment here. I have a 15 resolve and I have a 5 vitality. I got 10 hit points because I'm frail and I'm sickly and I can't take a lot of damage and I can't take a lot physically, but my mind is so tough that I just never give up. So I got 10 hit points. The same 10 hit points is that guy who's super tough, can eat whatever he wants to. You can poison him 4 times, and for some reason it never takes him down. But the dude's just ain't got it up here and gives up at the drop of a hat. He's dying just as easy as I'm dying on the battlefield. Well, why? He's tougher. He has more physical endurance. Yeah, but he gives up and I don't. So now you have a mental attribute that is also enhancing your ability to survive. Because to me, everything's an abstraction, right? Hit points are an abstraction on how hard it is to kill you. Well, maybe I'm hard to kill because I'm just a tough bastard. But maybe I'm hard to kill because I just don't quit. I just keep going. Maybe I'm the Black Knight and you've done chopped off my arms and legs and I'm like, get back here, I'll bite your legs off. There you go. Monty Python's Black Knight. His vitality is not the greatest in the world because he barely gets tapped with a sword and his arm falls off. But he's got tons of hit points because his mental toughness is so strong that he's yelling at you to get back here. He'll bite your legs off when he's got no arms and legs. And I thought that was important because in D&D, how often do we have somebody who has like no mental fortitude or anything, but they got 9,000 hit points because they have a high constitution? I think, I don't know for sure, won't know until I've done enough play testing, won't know until I've really put this through the ringer, but I think this is also going to get rid of the concept of a dump stat. When you have derived stats, such as Black Knight, Resolve 20, there you go. When you have a creature or a character, like when you have to look at it and say certain things are built from more than one statistic, I just can't dump everything into one or try and make everything great except this one. There's too much there, I think. I'm not. Will that work? Maybe. But that's the plan. That is the idea that I have there, and I'm hoping that it works out that way. I think it'll make a good game. And like I said, one of my big ideas here is I want game masters to be empowered to craft the game to fit their table. Before I talk about the second derived stat, just a quick reminder, I'm posting it in the chat right now. Eclectic Goat. She's sick, guys, or she might be sick. Doesn't matter. She's got a whole bunch of money that she's going to have to dump into figuring it out. So if you got a couple of bucks, click over there. Link's there. Link's going to be in the description if you're watching this later. Link's going to be in the pinned comment if you're watching this later. Link is right there in chat if you're watching this now. If you got a couple of extra bucks to spare, please throw them her way. Okay. Next derived stat. So, and I do, like I said, I absolutely want to hear what you guys have to think about these derived stats, if you think this sounds like a good idea and if it doesn't. But the second derived stat is instinct, which is real simple. There's no dividing or anything here. It's just the sum of awareness and reflexes. You take your awareness, your mental ability to recognize stuff going around in the area around you, your ability to see what's going on in the environment, your reflex, your physical ability to respond to it. You add them together, and congratulations, you now have the number that determines who reacts first. That's it. Okay? No need for rolling initiative. No need for a bunch of, charts and stuff like that. If you and I both want to grab this beer bottle off the table at the same time, okay, which one of you two has a higher instinct score? Oh, you do? You got it before I did. Because you both had the idea at the same time. Now it's resolved. Yeah, that's exactly right there. It's essentially intuition and situational awareness is essentially, this is what this kind of shows up. It is your awareness statistic, which is, like you said, intuition, situational awareness, your ability to recognize what's going on around you, to notice small differences, to notice little things that are out of order, and your reflexes, your ability to physically respond to it. Because I may have noticed it before you, but if I'm slower than you, guess what? You're getting into it first. So we fold this stuff in, and now we have a second derived stat, but because it is a function of two stats, we have also hopefully eliminated the dump stat idea. We're no longer penalizing somebody who puts some effort into their intellect or into their mental statistics. We've also made it to where you can't just be a bookworm and expect to get going. You can't just rely on dex and intelligence if you're a wizard. You have to have multiple statistics in order to make sure you go first. But that was my idea behind these derived statistics, is to make each one of these things a more meaningful investment of your time and your resources as a player, and to make you think about it away from the table instead of at the table. Instead of thinking about, well, what can I get for my plus to initiative and stuff to do my initiative roll? It's like, no, I know what my initiative is. It's already figured out. And when the GM says, man, here come the bad guys. I need everybody's instinct. I need everybody's instinct. You already know. You don't have to roll anything. You say, yeah, I'm a 23. Well, it can't be a 23, but yeah, I'm a 23. I'm a 30. I'm a 15. I'm a whatever. Because, like I said, that's a simple sum, which literally means you can be anywhere from 2 to 40. I guess you theoretically be anywhere from 1 to 40. I mean, you couldn't be 1. You would either be 2 to 40. So there you go. You cannot have a 1 instinct because you have to have at least 1 point in each score. But you can roll a 1 on the D12 for your genetic roll on both and have a 20 reflex and a 1 awareness, and you're just so fast you make up for the fact that you're a dunce. Let's see here. Class system can work. Just have to let the players have too much paper buttons. I mean, that's fair enough. The reason I like a role-based system is because your class is no longer just a set of abilities. It's more like, here are additional skills that you can invest in. If that makes sense. Believe it or not, I actually have a couple of those, because even though Cyber City Dodge is where I'm going first, I did actually do some work, kind of starting to set up the Dreaming Dark. Because, of course, like I said, the skill rolls, I mean, we do everything basic. Do everything based on AP, where, as you advance, you just gain AP, and you have to spend a certain amount to go up to the next rank for a skill. And then, of course, there's specialty skills, there's basic skills, and then, of course, there's stuff that's associated with your role. But, specialty skills are things that cost more money, or more AP rather, which you get 500 advancement points at the very beginning of the game to invest on whatever you want. And your basic skills are basically, they're going to be in just about anything. They represent extremely simple, natural extensions of basic human behavior, whether it's, trading or deceiving or balance or that sort of thing. Then specialty skills are things that you basically can't do unless you have some kind of training. They involve like surgery or anything that's like kind of an advanced specialized technique, and they cost more AP. Let's see here, a breakdown from difficulty ratings. I'm scrolling through my rule book here. I'm toying with the idea of using a bonus or penalty die system. Everything should be, and like I said, this goes back to it being a GM focused system. This is a game master focused system. You do not adjust die rolls. You adjust difficulty values. You raise and lower the DV. You do not change their rolls. You always want the players to have that maximum roll of 70. It makes it easier for your players. You got 6 people at the table, 5 players and a game master. If you do it this way, the game master is the only one who has to understand how things work under the hood. Players just have to know, roll my dice at my level. Done. Not only I get +2 for this, I get -3 for that, and I got laser sight that does this. Everything that they add to their rolls can be done away from the table, outside of the session. In the game, they roll a D30, they add a number, that's it. Everything else is done by the game master. And that gives you that ability to keep your players immersed, right? And then, of course, if we use a bonus die or, and this is something I'm not sure if I want to keep or not, is using a bonus and penalty die system, which of course is essentially just like advantage and disadvantage. I mean, I guess it's cool from a business standpoint because I might be able to get people to buy more D30s from me if I have 3 D30s because they can get up to 2 bonus die. Let's see here. When skill checks are not needed. Why have very low or very high DRs at all? and list of skills that are commonly found in every setting. Like I said, I've set this up to be something that you can make a game out of, at least for my rule system for my setting. Let's see here. Natural skills, effort rolls, which I do like effort rolls. Here's a couple of special things I got in here. Let's get past to these weapon skills and stuff. Got assessment rolls in situation or in circumstances where there is sufficient time to analyze the situation before taking an action. The GM can allow a character to make an assessment roll prior to attempting a skill check against the difficulty value. If the player chooses to make an assessment roll, they roll the skill check as they normally would, and if the result would be a success, the game master reveals the difficulty value to the player. If it would result in a failure, they they give a result that is within 10 points of a success. So let's just give an example. I come in and we're going to do a library search check. I'm trying to find something, and I walk in and there's just books everywhere. If I do an assessment check and I fail, I can tell you it's like, yeah, well, and it's probably going to be like a 30 or a 40. I'll say it's probably going to be a 40. All right, that 40, it could be a 50, it could be a 45, it could be a 35, it could be a 30. All you know is that 40 is within 10 points of the actual difficulty. If you succeed, you go in and you roll any success, I can say it takes a 35 to find what you're looking for in this library. So it makes your player have the ability to directly and mechanically assess if they have the time. If it's not, I'm running from the orcs and I need to figure out how hard it is to climb that wall. If it's just, I'm going to scale the side of this building and I don't want to fall off and die, I need to know how hard it is to climb, I can roll that assessment roll and use my knowledge of that skill to possibly figure out how hard it is. All right. Natural skills that are so inherent to a certain background, children raised in nomadic societies, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, when you select your origin, you're going to have certain natural skills. And this is a list of 3 to 5 skills that characters will always succeed when making an assessment roll. So if you're a Mongol and you were raised in the Mongolian steppes, I'm not going to make you roll an assessment roll on a horseback check because you grew up your entire life riding horses. And your origin as a Mongol horseman or as a Mongol tribesman means you know horses so well that you don't have to roll to know how hard something is. I grew up laying bricks and working around tradesmen. I know how long it's going to take to build that brick wall or how hard it is to build that retaining wall because I grew up playing with a spade and mortar, while my dad was kicking me away from the wheelbarrow, which also helps with your selection of what I call origins, which is where race would come in. And then effort rolls. After years of training, practice, development through your formative years, that kind of thing, some characters are going to have the inability to, quickly overcome and adjust to different things. This is based on your calling, which is where you would have your role or something similar to your class. And it's only your initial one. So if you try to do like what would be this game's functional multi-classing or multi-role character, it would only be your initial one, the one you grew up with, so to speak. You are able to re-roll any failure that is not considered a critical failure, which is like when you have that failure by more than 10 or so. So an example would be if I have a character that is a carpenter who's trying to build a frame for a shelter and they failed their initial roll, they can choose to make an effort roll if that craft happens to be something that was noted in their calling. And if they fail, even by the slimmest margin, they automatically get a critical failure. So basically it's kind of like Call of Cthulhu where you can push the roll. I've already got a failure, but on these specific rolls, I have the option to either try and recover and succeed, or possibly just screw up so bad it tanks the whole deal. So you can risk a higher level failure by pushing that roll. But you can't do it with everything. You can only do it with stuff that is selective to the choices you made in your character creation. I got rid of, look, I use origins as my my base. All right. In a fantasy game, an origin, it might be race. Okay, that might be your race. Heck, in a sci-fi game, it might be your race. It might be different. It might be different alien species, for instance. Or your origin might be based off of everything in this world is human, but my origin is I'm a Mongol raider, I'm a Roman citizen, I'm I'm a Hun, I'm a Viking. And of course, when when the GM creates these, they need to focus in on them. What sets an origin apart? You could be an alien from a gas giant. So it's going to change different things. It's going to give you your natural skills, and then of course origin abilities based off of different things. So like we'll talk about the Dreaming Dark here for a second. In the dark fantasy world of the Dreaming Dark, the race of man has taken over the world while the powerful races of the ancients died off and are all but extinct. And while men may lack technology, magic, and raw physical gifts of the ancient ones, they had the ability to adapt to their surroundings that the ancients simply lacked. And as a result, men from the various areas of the Dreaming Dark have different abilities based off of the lands that they call home. They may be a man of the sea who has natural abilities in acrobatics and swimming and sailing. And, he may have an ability like he doesn't have to, he can always make an effort roll on any failed attempt to avoid being tricked or falling on slick surfaces or something because he grew up on boats, right? He may be somebody who's, like I said, from the steps. And when it comes to horses and stuff, he has this thing, or maybe he always gets to re-roll if he might fall off of his horse or something. It's there for you to build it. And then I have callings, which is not necessarily like, an origin represents where you came from, basically. Callings represent how you've made your way in the world up until this point. And they give you things like focused skills, which are skills that are intrinsic. You automatically are granted an additional level in your skill, in your focus skills, and if you didn't already have it. And you get 2 levels if it's your initial calling, and you're allowed effort rolls in on those classes. So that represents, for creating callings. Like here's an example I've got in here. Tips for creating callings. When creating callings, it's helpful to think of the kind of adventures, trials, and tribulations a character might encounter in a given setting, and to break them down into categories. So if the game master wishes to develop a 1920s pulp noir crime theme, they might have a law enforcement category with like the hard-boiled detective, the hero cop, the private dick, and the fed, representing the jaded, no-nonsense career investigator, the idealistic defender of the working man, the good guy who plays by his own rules, and the outsider who has access to powerful resources. And then in the enemies, he might have a mastermind, a wise guy, a hitman, and an outlaw to give different choices there. So, your crusader might be a holy knight of the church, and he's armored by faith, and he has skills that allow him to help endure pain and, lore for the nobility, and he's good at persuading, and he knows rituals and theology, and he has different abilities as he upgrades his level, like, armor of righteousness, powered by his divine faith. He can call upon his God to give him strength to conquer his foes and resilience to suffer harm or no harm from violence of heretics, and, has different abilities. Like, if he succeeds on a ritual check, all damage dealt to the Crusader is reduced by his rank for 1 day. So he wakes up in the morning, he spends at least an hour doing his Crusader, doing a ritual, a religious ritual. And if he's successful in that religious ritual for that whole day, if he's a rank 5 Crusader, well, guess what? He has -5 damage for the whole day. That's the example that I have written up, that I had written up there. So I think that, like I said, a lot of what I'm doing here with this game is trying to give the game masters a lot of work, or a lot of tools to work with in order to really customize the game for the players, so that the players can just say, well, okay, what are the callings that are available? What are the origins that are available? Yeah, it may take, an hour or two for me to get my character rolled up, but then I can play in a 6, 8, 10, 12 month campaign, a 2-year campaign, and never have to touch the rule book again. Ever. The GM gave me the skill list for his setting. So I know what the skills are. He gave me the callings. He gave me the origins. I picked my origin. I picked my calling. I know what comes up next. I never have to touch this rule book again. I show up with my D30 and whatever dice I use for damage, and I'm good to go forward. At least that's what I hope. I am going to, let's see here. Let me see if I've got, pull something up here for Mr. Mac, because he's been patient and he's mentioned this a couple of times. I believe I have this somewhere. Matter of fact, I know I do. Let me pull up my Incarnate real quick. Because I believe I actually made this in Incarnate. There it is. Once this pulls up, I'm going to download this map and I'll show it to you. At least I think I will. Incarnate's being a bit of a pain in the butt right now. So the Dreamless Dark is a setting that I made. But hold on one second here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one real quick. I already touched on this. Listening to 2 streams at once. No, I've not done as much play testing yet. I've still got a couple of things to work out. I'm currently working on putting Cyber City Dodge together, which is a cyberpunk setting set in Dodge City, Kansas, where Dodge City, while the rest of the cyberpunk world has done the cyberpunk thing of being near future, but futuristic technology, big city type stuff, it's in the future. Dodge City is actually kind of regressed back to Cowtown. It's a waypoint between the 2 coasts. The coasts are where everybody lives, and kind of halfway through is Dodge City, Kansas. It's once again a way station Cowtown on the way to where you're going. So it's basically got motorcycle clubs all over the place. So 1%er motorcycle clubs run the entire place. And it kind of functions like a Wild West town despite being cyberpunk. And it has a gigantic, like, super mega truck stop that is a focus for everything. Like the Dodge City, Kansas airport has been completely converted into this gigantic, super, like, Buc-ee's on steroids truck stop, where a lot of stuff comes from. So that's what Cyber City Dodge is going to be like. And I'm going to shoehorn my 3.5 people into playing that. Absolutely. So let's do some looking here. It kind of is, in a way, Borderlands is not the worst representation. The difference is, since you actually have a copy of Corbid Codex Volume 1, you'll recognize the Strand, because that's where the second story in the book comes from. Is in the Strand. The Strand is a super highway that runs from Tokyo to San Francisco across the Pacific Ocean, and it is a very, very cyberpunk place. However, the Dodge City is way off in the center of the country for the same place. So let's see here. Let's save. No. Don't save it that way. I don't change anything. Let's see here. Export image. And yes, I'm going to just export it because that's going to be easier. This map is extraordinarily rudimentary, but I'm going to show this map anyway. Which, by the way, also going back to Corvid Codex, one of the fun things about the Corvid Codex project is that we share a lot of settings in the Corvid Codex. So, for instance, I can put something up there like I did put up the Dreamless Dark, which is this continent right here. And I basically said everybody is allowed to write stories in this. Here's what the world is like. Here's the rules for it. Here's how it's set up and what kind of time frame it is and all that stuff. And I said, go forth and create your own information in it. Create your own stories. There is a story that I believe is like right down here. I don't think you guys can see my mouse, unfortunately. But if you look at the E in Dreamless, the second E, like in the LES, and you go due north from that until you get to kind of the center of the map where that kind of giant super river goes through, and you've got that kind of swampy tree area right there before you get to the mountains. That is actually where the first story in Corvid Codex is set. Is right there in the center of the Dreamless Dark. The Dreamless Dark is it is a supercontinent world. Basically, the idea is it's kind of like Hyboria in that it is like a prehistory. The idea behind the Dreamless Dark is that any campaign that you do in the Dreamless Dark, or in the case of my writers, any story you write in the Dreamless Dark, is as a game master playing in Dreamless Dark, you would say that what we are doing is this is the legend or the story that is 10,000 years after this place doesn't exist anymore. This is this is the place where the myths are created. All right. It's very, very similar to Howard's Hyborian Age. It is a supercontinent. This is 90% of the land mass of this planet is right here in this map, and it's in the southern hemisphere. So that's why you can see all the snow and everything is down in the very southern part. It's because the entire continent is in the southern hemisphere. The ocean that surrounds the whole thing is extremely treacherous, and there are no maps of any islands or microcontinents that exist beyond this area. And the inhabitants call the continent El or Los, and the ocean the Endless Sea. In the legends in the future, where you as the game master would be, it's often kind of referred to as the unbroken land, because it's before the land broke and became a world. Became multiple continents. It is monotheistic. So it is actually a monotheistic world. But just like our ancient world, a lot of religions exist, and they either come from one or two things. It's either actual real religion deriving kind of power from the great one who wove the universe, or it's misrepresentations of things like finding stuff that's left over from the ancients, from ancient races that no longer exist on the world or only exist in ones and twos on the world. And that is where you pick up your that's where you actually pick up your those ancient religions. Is that maybe this is just a kind of the idea of like any technology sufficiently advanced is no different from magic. Same thing. Any race sufficiently advanced is no different from a god. So you have these ancient powerful races that maybe only one or two exist somewhere deep in the woods that has become a god, or old stories of these places that become a god. And all magic, regardless of whether it's divine magic or arcane magic, regardless of where you think it comes from, it all comes from tapping into a thing called the firmament, which is the cosmic web of power that the one God uses to bind the universe together. It has 6 major nations and 12 core cultures that are all kind of striving to carve their own way out throughout. Basically everything, the idea is that you run this game from the perspective of somebody who exists after this continent broke up and kind of made its own way. So your game exists in the ancient past. Magic is a mysterious power that is achieved through complicated and dangerous rituals that tap into the underlying power of the cosmos. It's not common. You don't have it everywhere. Some of these cultures may have a handful of people even capable of magic. There's ancient ruins and whatnot from creatures that, existed long ago. And it's like I said, characterized by one massive supercontinent. It's 5,000 miles from north to south. It's 6,200 miles from east to west. So this thing is gigantic. It is a massive, massive continent. It's a little bit like, to give you an idea, the 2 islands that you can see over on the far east, the frozen island in the south and that kind of triangular shaped island up there, those are about the size of Australia. So that's how big they are. You've got a desert empire that kind of exists there in the center. And it's actually just like Egypt would be in our world, it's a very, very old culture that exists from before, the ancient times. And then you have Auralia and Isir and Chalcedon, which are all, rose from tribal bands in different areas. You have the endless plains in the far west. The inner lands are your dry steppes and whatnot, where your nomads fight. You have obviously your desert to the north, and then you have your Jutlenders and your Vendels in the south who exist in the frozen lands, and that's where we build everything from. That's where I've started building it. Very much like Conan, very much like Hyboria. So you have your kind of Aesir, Viking, Scandinavian derived cultures there in the south. You have like your Mongolian style derived cultures there in the center. Up north, you have your Egyptian derived culture as well as your jungle cultures. Over there on the on the far west in that big strip over there, you have your more European derived cultures, your more Romano cultures. Now, thanks to one of my writers, you have like right there in the center on the, you kind of have a tribal. You actually have cannibals there now too, and you have kind of a tribal culture there as well, and a culture that has some coming of age rites and young lady who kills pigs. For those of you who've checked out Corbin Codex. Why did I name it the Dreamless Dark? Which yes, the Dreamless Dark. It's kind of follows that same kind of Conan style vibe, and not just the Conan style vibe, like the Tolkien vibe as well. This is the great dark reaches of prehistory that you only remember in your dreams. This is where, in the movie Excalibur, where Merlin stands up and says that he lives in the dreams. He's a dream to some, a nightmare to others. He is that ancient dying. This is the last vestiges of where any of the old world still has any power before it moves into quote unquote human history. That's what this is. And this is the fantasy setting that I've started to make that world for. And I hope that it ends up being a pretty good one. So, all right, guys, we're here at 8 o'clock. I was 10 minutes late, and we've been here for an hour and 50 minutes. So I do believe that we're going to get towards calling it a day here. Hopefully this I should have some more on this coming up soon. I will be looking for some play testers, hopefully. I am focusing, like I said, on the cyberpunk setting first, mainly because it is a lot easier for me to build core mechanics in something that's very close to modern, so I don't have to invent more things bringing it in. Though I have actually started writing a rule book for Dreamless Dark as well. My original idea was to release the system with both Cyber City Dodge and Dreamless Dark as sample settings that go with the rule book, because the idea is to show you how to create your own worlds and your own rule sets for your own games, but also having two very different playable settings with it. But I am focused predominantly on Cyber City Dodge right now. So guys, before I call it an evening, I am going to once more put it out there. If you have not run over and thrown what you can towards the Eclectic Goat, I would greatly appreciate it if you do so. I know she would too. She does a lot for this. She does a lot for this community. She does a lot for smaller creators, and she is really kind of a fantastic person. So let's see if we can help keep her online and hopefully help keep her healthy more than keep her online. But let's see what we can do to throw some help her way. And she of course has a stream coming up on Monday, her Slice and Dice stream, where she talks about different things. I think she's going to give out speak about a lot of editing. I may or may not be on that podcast, but she's going to talk about editing and formatting, some great stuff if you're thinking about your own games. But other than that, guys, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate you listening to me ramble about my little project here I got going on. I will keep everyone posted in both my videos and on future live streams. And I hope to see you guys next time. You guys have a good evening.